kunoko school ndofunikira ambiri koma chifukwa choti anawo sakumva ndiye khanga ti school chikubwerera mbuyo koma mwezi uno kufunika kuti ana aphunzire kwambiri chifukwa tili ngati pa training center pamafunika kuti anthu akhale ozindikira
Malawi's undergone a lot of change within the past few generations, so today's granddaughters experience a very different reality than their grandmothers did. That's due to a whole suite of things. One of those things was a raise of the legal marrying age to 18 and a lot of crackdown on young marriages in the area. Another huge aspect of this was the implementation of a free primary education program. So now, as of 1994, everyone in Malawi has access to a free primary school. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are deeply intertwined with this topic. There's a lot of SDGs that could apply to this, but two of the major ones are quality education and gender equality. So because of these goals, there's a lot of programs being implemented in the area. My field site was in the southern region of Malawi. In and around the Zomba district, I worked with translators and did 78 interviews with women, gathered equally from three groups, which was grandmothers, mothers, and young girls. Not a lot of past work has been done speaking directly to women in the rural areas, and there hasn't been a ton of spotlight on sort of what they would want for themselves. So the goal of this project was really to hear their voice and to be able to advocate for the things that they would want for themselves. Women today express a lot of dissatisfaction with their married life. One woman said, "Men have changed, they don't provide anymore. So for you to get married, you always regret that, like, if only I was single." A different woman expressed that, in my village, there are no good marriages these days. One man can have two wives and no marriages are good. But along with that, there's a big taboo of singleness. So women shared things like, a woman should not stay alone, school isn't for everyone, so if you cannot do school, you should be married. Another woman shared that if a girl doesn't get married before 25, people in the village will condemn her and say that she's barren. And finally, a woman shared that it's a good thing for a woman to be married. A woman who is not married will always be accused of being a prostitute. Other ladies will ask her if she is sleeping with their husbands. So it's like women are in this double bind where their marriages aren't satisfactory or they're not serving them well, but they're afraid that if they're not married, they'll be sort of a social outcast. The other women in the village won't treat them with respect. They'll be worried that they're prostitutes or those sorts of things. So even though marriages aren't serving them well, they would rather be married to someone that's like really not working out well for them than face these sort of like social repercussions of being unmarried. So for this generation, they supposedly have different options. A lot of women express that, in my day, I only was able to get married, and that's why they have these sort of issues going. But today, young girls can get married, or they can go to school, which is the new thing. Or they can also possibly start a local business. And the school and business track weren't necessarily things that were available to their grandmothers or possibly their mothers. So part of my interviews were a vignette study where I was able to share a story with my participants and ask their opinions about it. So the first one was that there was a girl that went to college and she delayed marriage to do it, but she did end up getting her degree. I asked them, is this okay? Overwhelmingly, we saw that yes, this was okay, that we encourage girls to graduate from college. But then I asked them, does this happen often? And this was mostly a no. That we want girls to go to college, this is sort of our ideal, but our reality is that this isn't something that happens very often. The next vignette that I shared was there's a girl and she was in standard 6 and she dropped out of school to have a baby. So I asked them, is this okay? And this was a very overwhelming no, this is not okay. And then I asked them a follow-up, does this happen often? And this was a big yes also. So even though our ideal is that no one will drop out of school and have a baby, this is what happens most of the time. A big reason for this is that girls are simply following in their mother's footsteps. These girls are growing up seeing their mothers and their aunts and their grandmothers raising children and being a wife, and that is what they aspire to do. So now that this new option has come in and they are encouraged to do it, doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to change what their dream is or what they want for their life. These mothers and these grandmothers want their children to choose differently. They want them to be different from themselves, but the daughters are like, but that's not what I want. What I want is to be a mother, and what I want is to be a wife. And for the other set of girls who actually do really want to pursue education, there are a lot of barriers to accessing that. One, of course, is accidental pregnancy. There's no structure in place to actually allow for girls that are pregnant or that have had children to go back to school. So once you're pregnant, it's sort of like, that's it. You have to get married now, like, you're done. Another reason that people stated was early death of a family member. So a lot of women shared that, maybe when they were young, their mother passed away, and then they had to inherit their siblings and take care of their siblings, and the only way that they would be able to financially provide is to marry a husband that would actually be able to financially provide. So that's sort of a common story. Another major thing is domestic and sexual abuse, whether that's like, girls talked about how their school would be really far away, and on the way to school they would get threats about sexual abuse, and so they decided to stop going to school. Other girls shared about how their mother was abusive, and so to get out of the house, they had to get married just to separate from their mothers. Other people shared about, mothers and stepfathers and fathers holding school fees over their heads, and, inflicting abuse in trade for those school fees. So lots of stories like that. So since there's so much valorization of this life path that it doesn't happen very often, we love girls who go to school, there is a lot of negative discourse around these common practices. So one of my participants shared that I would advise my kids not to take my path. I don't do anything, I'm just home depending on my husband, but if they work hard, they will have jobs. And a different woman shared, I would have loved for my children to be educated. My firstborn daughter was in town for school, but now she's pregnant and living with the boy. So my dream is getting destroyed. So a lot of these women sort of share that they wish so bad that their children would be different, but it doesn't always work out that way, and so there's a lot of negative discourse around that. This exemplifies what Edward Fisher calls frustrated freedom, where he says, in such a condition, opportunity and resource deficits frustrate the perceived capacity to successfully make the decisions and choices that they believe would enhance their well-being. So in this case, there's a lot of empowerment work being done in Malawi in terms of education. So NGOs are going in and telling girls, you can do it, which is great, and that raises their agency, but it doesn't raise their opportunity structure. So the structures are all the same, they're still facing the same problems, so they have this greater capacity to aspire, but they don't have a difference in their day-to-day realities, which really, this gap just leads to a lot of frustration because they feel like they should be able to attain it, but they haven't found themselves able to attain it. So what does this mean for the future of Malawi? But also, what does this mean for nonprofit workers, for development workers, for public health planners, for all these sorts of things? I think raising women's agency is a great thing, and that there should be a continuation of raising agency. I don't think that's ever going to be a bad thing. But there needs to be work on these structures to be able to actually partner with these women and give them the opportunity to actually attain these goals that they've gotten. I think that a lot of work in the past hasn't really taken their ideas into consideration, but these women have a lot of ideas about how they could better be helped or what they would like for themselves. So I think that the future of this is really heading towards a more collaborative work. I think that this really means that the future of development work and the future of all of this is really working with these women on these topics that really affect them, and working on ways that you can better support them in ways that they want. So